Before we start the session, the topic is solid waste management in cities. For this, we have our chairperson, Dr. N.B. Mazumdar. He is the Honorary Director General, Sulabh International Social Service Organization. Can I request Mr. Mazumdar to come up? Okay, he'll be joining us shortly. Lead speaker, Mr. Kulwant Singh. Okay. Can I have Mr. Ganesh Kumar on the dais, please? Mr. Harshil Narula. Mr. Michael. May I request Ms. Milen to come up on the dais, please? Dr. Karamanos on the dais, please. Ms. Pinky Chandran, may I have you on the dais, please? Mr. Harish Kumar. Mr. R. Venkateswaran. Mr. James. Mr. Kulwant Singh, can I have you on the dais, please? Mr. Mazumdar was just here, he's just gone out. Anyway, I will introduce him before we start the session. Mr. Mazumdar is the Honorary Director General at Sulabh International Social Service Organizations, Affordable On-Site Sanitation. Prior to this, he was working as Chief Technical Officer at Ireland FS, Environment Infrastructure and Services Limited for 11 years. He has been a member of various expert committees of government in India. He has 36 years of experience in waste management, sanitation, renewable energy, and financing of infrastructure projects. He also worked as consultant at TERI on waste management, environmental issues, and renewable energy activities. Mr. Mazumdar, Ruchi, can you please see where the gentleman is? He came in with us. Let us welcome our chairperson, Dr. N.B. Mazumdar, who is the Honorary Director General, Sulabh International Social Service Organization. Sir, I would like to hand over the session to you to introduce the speakers and continue with the session.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. I have a number of distinguished speakers here. So, Ms. Milen Volkmar, who is Director International Sales and Innovation, QSoft GmbH from Germany. Dr. Panagiotis Karamanos, who is Team Leader EU Technical Cooperation for Environment in India project. Then Ms. Pinky Chandran, who is Director, Jain University and member of SWMRT, India. Mr. Harish Kumar, who is Consultant, Development Environergy Services Limited, India. Mr. R. Venkateswaran, Senior Vice President, Persistent Systems Limited, India. Mr. James D. Michelsons, Senior Industry Specialist, Waste, Climate Business Department, IFC, India. So, now we will start with the session because the time has already started. So, may I now invite the lead speaker. So, may I now invite Dr. Kulwant Singh, who is the founder of 3R Waste Foundation India.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates and colleagues on the panel. I thought it's a very important agenda to discuss about the waste management issues with which, as a matter of fact, we in this country are confronted with. And 3R Waste Foundation, which I take care, as a matter of fact, has its key agenda for integrated solid waste management, where we, I would say that, assist local governments in this country for developing a strategic framework. And I will briefly like to touch upon the approach that we have normally been taking in developing this strategic framework so that that becomes a kind of basis for, I would say, further discussion and interaction with the panel. Well, integrated solid waste management framework and the kind of tools that we use, our focus remains mainly on three things. The focus is on the assessment of the situation, then planning of the situation, and evaluation, that we try to make. And the objective mainly remains to achieve a kind of sustainability. But what do we do really in that case? We are, as a matter of fact, interacting with various stakeholders who are really several, when you talk of the waste management, there are local authorities, there are non-government organizations, community-based organizations, service users, service providers, private informal sector, private formal sector, donor agencies, and others. There are several elements, so far as waste management is concerned, not only its generation and separation, collection, transfer, transportation, treatment, and disposal, but also the whole focus does remain on reduction, reuse, recycling, and recovery, basically. And of course, it does have technical aspects involved as you develop a kind of framework for this purpose: technical, environmental, health, financial, etc., etc. And as a matter of fact, as I said, the objective does remain only one, and that is the sustainability part. Well, waste definition, solid waste definition, for the first time by the Bureau of Indian Standards just last year in 2016, as a matter of fact, has provided a kind of basis. What exactly does it cover? It covers solid or semi-solid domestic waste, including sanitary waste, commercial waste, institutional waste, catering and market waste, and other non-residential waste. Street sweeping, silt removed or collected from the surface drains, horticulture waste, agriculture and dairy waste, treated and biomedical waste. This is the kind of very comprehensive definition, but it does not include several other types of waste. It doesn't include industrial waste. It doesn't include biomedical waste. It doesn't include e-waste, battery waste, radioactive waste, which is generated in the area under the local authorities and other entities mentioned in the solid waste rules. So we are largely confining ourselves to, the solid waste generated within municipal boundaries, but at the same time not including some of these types of waste for which there are different kinds of rules that are, as a matter of fact, provided for. Well, actually, if you see the attributes of integrated solid waste management framework, the focus is on reduction at source, focus is on environmentally suitable reuse, recycle, and treatment, and disposal in properly designed and managed landfills. Properly designed and managed landfills. These are some of those characteristics which are really, really very important. Now, what we are really arguing is that waste is not waste. Waste is actually a wealth, because from what you call waste, you are able to have a lot of recovery. You are able to have recovery, you are able to produce energy, you are able to recycle and reuse, and then whatever little is left out as a garbage, as a matter of fact, is disposed of. But waste, as a matter of fact, has to be treated as a wealth. I'll talk of this a little later, but let me just say that waste actually should not have a linear approach. Waste actually has to be a circular economy approach, so that you are able to reuse the waste, recycle the waste, and continue with that. But so far as issues relating to the waste management in India are concerned, it still continues to be a major issue. We are a country with almost like 8,000 towns and cities as per, I would say, that 2011 census, and there are almost like 55 cities which are 1 million plus. The total solid waste generated by 300 million people in urban India, it's about 38 million. By the way, currently the Indian urban population, as we talk in 2017, has already touched about 435 million. So we are just talking of 300 million people contributing 38 million tons of metric tons of waste. Overall collection efficiency is 70% average. Major metro cities which have got good arrangements at a city level, 70 to 90% waste gets collected, no doubt about it, but largely several smaller cities, it's below 50%, below 50%. If I say largely, out of 8,000 towns, 7,500 towns are able to collect less than 50% on a daily basis. Processing and disposal is only 13% of the collected waste. Urban local bodies, this is a very important part which I like to touch upon because it also concerns, I would say, that the corporate sector. If you see the financial part of it, so far as urban local bodies are concerned, they are financially extremely weak. Of their, total budget which they spend on per ton of municipal solid waste, they are spending almost like per ton Indian rupees 500 to 1,500. But where do they spend? 60 to 70% goes on street sweeping. It's very important. 60 to 70% only for sweeping. That's their so-called HR expenditure, only for keeping it clean. 20 to 30% goes on transportation, and less than 5% is left out on processing and disposal. So if we are looking for some solutions, we'll have to really think of, and please do not have big hope that there'll be funds that will be available from local governments. They are only having very limited fund, less than 5% on processing and disposal. This is based on a study that has been undertaken by Niti Aayog, and these figures are from the government only. So challenges that we have in India, which we are facing: poor collection efficiency, no waste segregation, inadequate processing and disposal, lack of scientific landfill sites, reclamation of existing landfills per se. So that's a kind of challenge that we have so far as the sector is concerned. This, I will not go between the lines, but I am just saying this chart actually gives you various statutory obligations and regulatory drivers in India which are there. Basically we do have, for example, various rules and regulations. Just last year, Solid Waste Management and Handling Rules 2016 were released by, as a matter of fact, the Government of India. And the chairman of the session was also the chair of a kind of committee which finalized the manual on it. So therefore, basically, I would say there are regulatory drivers, there are enough laws, rules, regulations, there is no dearth of it. So if I just talk on the rules 2016, they are focusing on that we should have a 3-bin system so that we are able to segregate at source. Segregate at source. That means, first of all, the household level. Integration of rag pickers into the formal sector. These are recommendations, part of the rules. Collection and disposal of sanitary waste. Extended producer responsibility. That means collect back scheme for packaging waste. There is a corporate sector responsibility, because if they are packing certain beautiful things, they also should be responsible for collecting those packages or managing them or take some responsibility for this purpose. User fees for collection is very, very important. These are some of those part of the rules which have been announced just last year. Waste processing and treatment also, well, basically there are so many options, composting, biomethanation or biodegradables locally, and earmarking of the land in some of these SEZs or industrial parks so that, you know, the waste is managed. That is the area which all our, I would say that master plans also ignore it. Promoting use of compost, it's also very important to have a level playing field with the chemical fertilizers, and therefore the policies need to be put in place. Promotion of waste to energy also is another important area which, as a matter of fact, these rules touch upon. Again, this is a very interesting slide, but I'll not go in detail. These presentations will be available to you. Because implementation and enforcement responsibilities, if you actually see, even at a central level, there are as many as 6 ministries which are involved. If you see the state level, there are as many as 8 departments of the state governments which are involved. So therefore, basically, if you see the administrative responsibilities for implementation and enforcement, they are enough in terms of institutional as well as legal framework, which is quite strong. But still, it's very important that, you know, basically, the agenda still remains to be implemented. Well, again, this slide actually gives you various characteristics of waste that gets generated, particularly for various categories of cities, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, or for that matter in different kinds of regions. I'm not going into the data details, but I'm just leaving it at that if when we prepare a framework for a particular city, we, as a matter of fact, definitely look into all these characteristics. I'll just like to, you know, continue with this little slide, current practices on solid waste management in India. You have storage at source, no segregation, unfortunately. Even if segregated, it gets mixed during transportation. And there is hardly any provision for construction and demolition waste. There are only 3 or 4 plants that have come up during the last 4 or 5 years, you know, and that also in and around the city of Delhi, not all over. Collection techniques, there are no complete coverage of door-to-door collection, no separation mechanism of collected waste. Waste collectors are presently part of only the informal sector. They are not in the formal sector. Intermediate storage, if you see waste receptacles, what in the city of Delhi we call them dalaos, they are just uncovered. As a result, a lot of nuisance, bad smells, etc. No separation mechanism for dry or wet waste. And poorly maintained, they are health hazards. Segregation happens at every level, but no formal organized system of segregation is there. There are rag pickers who segregate. There are waste pickers, Kabadiwallas, basically. I would say that they are the most respected lot, but we have not recognized them to give them a formal status. Recovery and recycling of waste is only done by scavengers and scrap dealers, which is highly hazardous. And let me just mention to you, friends, there is a study that has been carried out that while average life expectancy for an average Indian is almost like 65, average life expectancy of these rag pickers is only 45. So it's you can imagine the kind of amount of hazardousness of that. Segregation of inert waste is also an issue because it affects the processing and disposal, basically that. Transportation, small cities and towns, actually, which are very large number, as I said, 7,500 towns and cities, small cities. Open transport system, odor is quite a nuisance. Manual loading, time-consuming, health hazard, etc., etc. There are big towns and cities, basically, where automated and mostly covered, but poorly managed. Processing and disposal, well, as a matter of fact, they are dumped on open land. Largely, landfill sites are dumping sites. They are not scientifically developed. But, you know, basically, we are promoting now composting, biomethanation, and waste to energy. These are the ones. Landfills, as I said, are just dump yards. Rag pickers are working on these landfill sites are posed with a lot of health hazards. Their life expectancy less than 45. So the municipal solid waste management mechanism, basically, I would like to, friends, say we have technologies, but we need to involve communities. And we need funding, we need finance for implementation. There are technologies which are available. I'm sure there are panelists who are going to discuss, but I am just trying to say that technologies which are available for pre-processing, conversion technology, just 2 minutes. And then, as a matter of fact, usable resource, for example, creation of energy, etc. Technologies are available. I just listed few of them. And I'm sure there'll be others who are going to discuss them. But we really made to make use of them and apply them. Community involvement is very important for implementation of this program. We need information, education, and communication models. We need community-led initiatives in solid waste management. There are initiatives that are needed for capacity building and training. Swachh Bharat mission, I'll not dwell on it at length, but then is trying to aim at that, basically with the partial financial support coming from the central government, cities should be able to, as a matter of fact, touch upon this issue of waste management so that although, of course, the date is October 2019, but whatever it is, the idea basically is that there should be, by 2019, 100% coverage for waste collection and processing in at least statutory towns, 4,041. They are just ignoring for the time being what we call them as census towns. Their number is almost like 4,000, basically. Funding and financing implementation, the 12th plan had some funding. Now there are no plans which are available from 1st April 2017. 5-year planning system is abolished in the country completely. Basically, there are funding possibilities only through the ministry under various programs, including Swachh Bharat mission. But as I mentioned to you, that funds with the local governments are very limited. Just on average, 5% for processing and disposal, which are very, very negligible. There are large number of options which are there for, possible options for financing, which I have tried to list them out, including, I would say that, waste disposal fees or revenues from treatment of waste, etc., or investment by private sector. But let me just say that, they have to be actually, efforts have to be made for raising more resources for this purpose. I will not go into this. If there will be question answers, I'll be taking up. But then we are trying to focus on public-private partnership framework for waste management projects in India. And there are several key challenges and proposed solutions in this regard. But it is happening, but it is happening in a very limited way. I am going to conclude by saying there's a study that has been done by ASSOCHAM, Associated Chamber of Commerce, which is actually in the public domain, which indicates that waste management is a $13 billion business. You have to develop the recycling industry in this country in a formal way, such that you are able to recycle the waste and make waste to wealth. And that's what it is. And they have really argued for a case to make waste management and treat the recycling industry, whether it is paper, plastic, glass, metal, or whatever, basically, if you give them a status of an industry, which at this moment is not, then in that case, waste recycling industry surely will be able to take the agenda forward and keep the country clean and go to what we call basically from a linear economy to a circular economy so far as waste management is concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, for a very nice and erudite presentation. I'm sorry I had to interrupt you because there are 10 more speakers and we have about 1 hour left only. But he touched upon very important issues and he traversed through the whole gamut of the scenario. Starting from the actual situation, the rules, the different kind of rules which govern this sector, and you know, the tendency of moving from, or the desirability of moving from a linear economy to a circular economy. Those are very, very nice suggestions, and I think his presentation would provoke a lot of thought amongst the participants and the panelists. So now, may I, okay, before that, I would request each panelist to take about 5 minutes. Because we don't have any time left, you know, so we'll take 5 minutes for each panelist. And what I would suggest or request you is to focus on what exactly you or your organization is doing. So now I'm starting from Mr. Ganesh, who is the technology lead of Kabadiwalla Connect.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ganesh. As Sir said, I'm leading the technology division at a social enterprise called Kabadiwalla Connect. So I would give you a brief intro about what our company does initially. So we are an award-winning social enterprise that uses technology to leverage the circuits of the informal waste ecosystem to divert waste away from the landfill. So we have a set of software solutions that will help the informal waste ecosystem to source more material. So I'll start with the B2C component, which is our consumer-facing site. We have an app called Recycle, which is a complete waste management companion for small and medium generation. So just to give a context, if you see out of all the waste that is generated in urban India, almost 70% of it comes from these small generators. When I say small and medium generators, these are the households, the small shops, the restaurants, etc. But if you see what is being recycled, it's more from the bulk process end. And we aim to help these small and medium generators to manage their waste more responsibly. So that is the whole point of Recycle. So with using Recycle, you can find your nearest Kabadiwalla. Just to give context, Kabadiwallas are the small aggregators of waste. They come one level above the waste pickers. So we help these residents to connect to these Kabadiwallas so that they can sell their waste to them. And also Recycle, we use it as a medium to communicate to these users on how important it is, like things like source segregation, everything. So next is our B2B component of it, where we work with the Kabadiwallas, where we try to source specific materials from them. We run a materials recovery facility. We currently are sourcing PET bottles from the Kabadiwallas, and we are processing it on our godown. So far we have sourced back about 125 tons of PET plastic, diverted it away from the landfill using this whole technology stack. Now this is pretty much what we do. And to give context on how we approach this and why we did it. So in 2014, we did an extensive research on the Kabadiwalla or the informal waste supply chain in India. So if you see traditionally, you have your waste generators and then you have your curbside collection, then you have transfer stations, and then the waste goes to the landfill. And you have these waste pickers who collect at all these different junctions and they sell to the Kabadiwallas or the small generators. Then it goes to a medium generator and then probably a large generator or directly to the processor who, end of the day, make product out of these materials. We focused more on the small aggregators. So these are the guys who have, shops, ideally very small ones. We mapped over 1,000 Kabadiwallas in Chennai alone. And what we found some key insights based on the research. So generally, informality, if you see, is attributed close to low productivity, poverty, etc. But what we found out, what these guys were very efficient. They were sourcing back over 33% of the all recyclable waste that is generated in Chennai, and that is when we realized that it is very important to build a solution that is inclusive of these Kabadiwalla networks or the informal network for it to be successful. We also found that these Kabadiwallas face three major challenges in sourcing. First is the lack of visibility. Even despite their contribution to sourcing back so much material and reducing the waste that goes to the landfill, you see that they are normally ignored in mainstream discussions on solid waste management. And next is the fact that they lack a formal integration with the processes. So if you see, ideally, as I said, these are small shops. They try to source back as much as they can, but the amount that they source back is generally in terms of few hundred kgs. But the processors expect it in few tons so that it's financially viable for them. So what we are trying to do here with our tech stack is we help the Kabadiwallas to report the amount of waste that they have. And at an ecosystem level, we are able to meet the demand of the processors. And at the same time, we are able to give better prices for these Kabadiwallas because we are cutting off a series of middlemen in process. Finally, we believe that our approach helps improve the goals of circular economy and also helps provide livelihood support for these Kabadiwallas who are extremely marginalized. So also that one more thing I would like to highlight is the fact that how much the residents have to contribute towards this. That's the whole point of our app, Recycle, because we want source segregation to happen. It is one of the major challenges. And once you start source segregating, as I said, we can reduce almost 70% of the waste that goes to landfill. And also sending more material into this Kabadiwalla ecosystem will ensure that they get a livelihood as well, and most of our material is recycled. So let's work together to send less waste into India's landfills. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ganesh Kumar. I think that's a great step forward. And this is perhaps going to make a, sea change in this scenario where we have the rack pickers. There are a lot of discussion across the board, whether it is in the ministries while we form the rules or in other meetings, everywhere these issues are discussed. But I think what you are doing is a great step forward. And even personally, I'll be very interested to know more about your activities, etc. Thank you very much. So may I now request Mr. Harshil Narula, who is Director, Freshe, to make...
Good morning, everyone. Now, a lot has been talked about smart cities and how important the aesthetics, the environment, the people are. Much less has been talked about waste. Now, you see a picture on the screen over here, which is a very familiar situation, especially in India. Now, important parts of smart city being the smart environment, the economy, the smart people, the utilities. I believe one of the most important utilities that a smart city has is the waste collection and the waste management systems, because waste being the most aesthetically visible and most challenging utility which is there, which not only just impacts the health and environment, but also impacts the tourism, the economy, and a lot of other areas. Typically, there are two collection systems which are being practiced in India as of now. One is the manual door-to-door collection system, which the previous speakers also laid some light upon. And in building systems, we also use something known as gravity chutes, wherein there is a vertical pipeline which has been laid down through which the waste travels a vertical height and then goes down and gets stored at a bottom collection area. Now, this has various disadvantages: visible waste, human contact, odor, rodents in the facility, traffics of trucks in the facilities, unhygienic and air pollution are some of the key disadvantages of these manual integrated systems of collection as of today. Now, what is pneumatics? Pneumatics is nothing but the force of air being used to transport material from one place to another. Now, this technology has been there in the world for the last 150 years, being used for various applications. We are now putting this into use for waste. This is a typical example of how this particular system would look like, in which you have vertical pipes laid down inside the building, and then you have horizontal pipes running through the basement of a building or underground, which will transport the waste first vertically and then horizontally from a particular point to a central collection area, which can even be up to about 7 kilometers away. So what we are talking about is basically a bunch of buildings being connected through a vertical pipeline, then being connected through a single horizontal pipeline and taking the waste away without any waste trucks, without any people being involved, through a complete sealed system, completely odorless, completely automatic, and then taking it to one central place where we can further treat it or take it out for landfilling. There is also possibility to connect the dustbins. There's also possibility to connect the dustbins, wherein the dustbins will be placed in the entire city centers or parks or stadiums, etc. And as soon as these dustbins are filled up, they'll actually be, the waste will actually be transported through underground pipeline to, again, a central collection area for which pneumatic pressure is used. Now, we typically take the air not from any artificial source, but from the environment itself. We have rooftop vents or air vents at different locations where we are actually taking the air through which the entire waste is being transported. So what we are doing is we're not using a lot of energy. It's actually a very energy efficient system. And we're just transporting the material, the waste, through negative pressure inside the pipeline. Again, a pictorial demonstration of how the system looks like. Now, as I mentioned, there is a single collection point for the entire system of a span of about 7 kilometer radius. Now, this is a typical comparison between a conventional system, what I mentioned about how a pneumatic system looks like, in which the material storage that the previous speakers were discussing about at various locations is completely eradicated. The advantages of this system being that there is absolutely no odor, since it's a completely sealed system. You need absolutely no staff for waste collection or segregation or transportation. The entire visibility of waste goes down. Exposure of trucks in the entire facility goes down. You save a lot of carbon emissions, fuel, etc. In fact, there are various applications for a pneumatic tube system, not just for waste, but it is also used for laundry in hotels or service apartments, in hospitals, in industries, for cash transportation, etc. There's a small case study that we conducted, and this is a huge project that we are doing in San Francisco, in which we did a lot of waste generation patterns on how much waste is being collected in a particular week, and how many waste truck stops. Now, this is very important when you talk about fuel and energy efficiently, that how many waste truck stops are actually there to collect all the waste in a particular environment or a particular scenario. The current collection system, of course, is manual collection, and this is overview of the entire project that we are doing. So all the dots that you see are either buildings or open dustbin areas through which waste is currently being connected through an underground pipeline system, in which the waste will be transported to only 2 locations. It's a span of about 10 kilometer radius. So this is the waste being generated as of today from towers, from dustbins, open dustbins, etc. Now you see over here that if I talk about the dustbin open systems, there are about 1,500 plus points where the waste is being collected. That means there are about 1,500 odd truck stops that the truck has to make every day to collect the waste. But with our system being implemented, there will only be 1 or 2 stops for the truck to collect all that waste. So this is typically how the system would look like. We have a few success stories across the world and across India. right from 1982, where we first installed our system in the US itself, and then having installations in more than 60 countries today. We in fact have done about 50 plus projects in India and about 3,000 projects globally for a system like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Narula. This again is another future step, especially for the upcoming cities, where if the city planners think that this is possibly the optimal solution, they have a great solution like this, but they have to weigh the pros and cons. But you have not described any example in India as such. Which one, for example? Yeah. Okay.
For example,
Okay.
No, Give City, for example. So all the 128 buildings are integrated with a system like this. And then we are doing a lot of other private projects and government projects, which are smaller areas, it's about 100 acres, 500 acres, which are being connected through a system like this.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Gift City, of course, I have seen, because I was earlier associated with ILNFS, so I had seen that. Thank you very much. So now, may I request Mr. Michael Lindenmayer, who is Entrepreneur in Residence and Toilet Accelerator Project Lead of TBC, Toilet Board Coalition from Switzerland.
And back up the mic goes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We're going to talk toilets. Give me some excitement here. No energy in the room. Oh, no. Okay, by the time we're done, you're going to give me a proper hello to finish this conversation. So I'm Michael Lindenmayer, and I love to talk toilets. And today we have an amazing group of panelists, and I'm super excited about the things they've been talking about. I completely agree. Waste is not waste. As Mr. Singh said, it is a resource. And when we look at sanitation, we see that it is a massive crisis, right? You cannot have a situation where you do not have toilets and basic sanitation. It stinks. It's bad. Disease. So how do we address it? I mean, India is amazingly taking the lead and having this conversation happen. But when you think about what happens afterwards, I often think of sanitation systems almost like a marriage. Right now, there's all these proposals, people get married, they start the journey, but then the question is, what happens afterwards? Where's the maintenance? You're going to have to invest on an ongoing basis for it to thrive. There are untold number of stories where sanitation systems were put in place and they failed afterwards miserably. It's like a toilet graveyard. So at the Toilet Board Coalition, what we are is a collection of supersized organizations as well as medium and small who've come together. It's a business-led coalition, which includes Unilever, Kimberly-Clark, and others. And what we've been doing is saying, after you have the conversation, how do we make this a thriving, growing business for people that's attractive? Right now, just as a show of hands, how many people in this room, and I hope some hands go up here, have a sanitation entrepreneur as a friend? Not as a business colleague, as a friend. No hands. One hand, two hands. Yes, great. I predict next year each one of you will have your hands up. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry opportunity. So one of the things that we've been doing is finding and identifying sanitation entrepreneurs around the world. And then here in India, we're working with Samagra and Svada. How many people have heard of these two organizations? One hand. Okay, I really ask you, go look online, tweet about this, take a note to yourself, look up these examples. These are people who wake up, men and women, who wake up every single day trying to crack the code on one of the most basic problems that affects the most people on the planet, i.e. everyone. Everyone has to go to the bathroom. So what we do afterwards is we then take talent within our organizations and help these young entrepreneurs. Because you see, just by a show of hands in this room, there are insufficient number of people helping these entrepreneurs. It's already hard to be an entrepreneur. Imagine being a toilet entrepreneur. It's a very lonely corner. So what we do is really help them have a tribe around them, get the skills they need. So for example, with Samagra, which is a public toilet business in Pune, Last year, they had 15 locations. In collaboration with us, they now have 153, and by the end of the year, they'll have over 500. So pretty soon, they'll be serving over 1 million people. And I predict that Samagra, if they have the right team around them over time, will be serving millions and millions of people. And hopefully, that will attract competition and other players. The second part is that we've been working really hard to see what are some of the future spaces. So there are these reports over here by the front door. You can pick them up. One of the big areas that we're looking at is the circular economy, but we're also looking at something which is really powerful, which is smart sanitation. Has anyone ever heard of smart sanitation? Show of hands. What does it mean to you, smart sanitation? Yes, so one is making it efficient. But what if you look at waste as one of the largest and most untapped sources of health data on the planet? Every single time you go to the restroom, you're putting out tons of health data. Now imagine if you could collect that at a city level. You could find Ebola patient 1. You could stop cholera outbreaks. And at an individual level, you could get customized medicine. So the Toilet Board Coalition has been working with some of the smartest IoT, big data, and smart city players to think about how do we not only install sanitation, but how do we install smart sanitation. So I'd also suggest, if you get a chance, please take a look at this. You can also find those reports at www.toiletboard.org. Please feel free to take your phones out. I won't take no offense. You can talk smart sanitation, say you heard it here. So when it becomes commonplace, you can be one of the first people who participated in hearing about it. And if you're in this space, reach out to us. We are absolutely collaborative and looking for the best and brightest to crack the code on this. The final part here I want to say is that when I look at something like GreenVac, that is an incredible enterprise. Actually, pneumatics for waste sanitation is being done on cruise ships all around the world. This is something that is the most common thing. And when you think about hyper-urban slums or informal communities, actually above-ground pneumatic systems might be a really interesting solution. So I hope that you become a billionaire here in India by installing those. It's odorless, it's quick, and it's also, as you said, a low pain point. So these are the kind of innovation opportunities that are out there. So I hope that next year, when we get together, there's double the number of people in the room, and there's also 50 to 60% of the people here who say they know someone in sanitation. So again, feel free to read the reports, reach out to us. It's thetoiletboard.org. We welcome the dialogue, the collaboration, and we hope that we can build sustainable and scalable solutions together. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Lindenmayer, for a very enthusiastic and charged presentation. May I now request Ms. Milen Volkmar, who is Director, International Sales and Innovation, QSoft GmbH, Germany.
Well, also a warm welcome from my side. Michael said he likes to talk toilets. I like to talk waste. And yeah, let's see how that goes. I'm from QSoft. Okay. We are a German-based company. We are actually in the market for over 25 years so far. We offer IT and software solutions specifically for municipal and commercial waste management companies. We have been operating in Germany as well as Europe so far. And I think we are all clear that solid waste management is a very integrated part of any kind of smart city. And I mean, if you go out in the streets, you actually see that India still has a lot of development and evolution to do when it comes to solid waste management. But the first problem everybody who is probably into solid waste management here in India has a huge question mark, because where do you actually start, right? Because we have seen it so far also with the presentations before me that there are a lot of problems you actually have to tackle, because you have a huge group of stakeholders that are involved in the solid waste management process here in India. So We actually think, since we also consult European companies and actually how to set up their solid waste management processes, India actually has two specific sets of problems to tackle. One of them is the decentralization, and the second one is segregation. Decentralization, meaning, as we saw, there are a lot of stakeholders involved in the process, right? From the waste pickers to the actual citizen, to Kabadiwallas, and to informal waste markets. And setting up a centralized system, as you see it in Europe or specifically also in Germany, is probably not the way to go in India, right? A decentralized system where everybody can actually participate is probably the best option so far. The second one is segregation. We have seen a tube system that actually might work in the future, but if you actually put in waste that is not segregated in these tubes, and they actually go back to the waste facility, the system won't work. So you actually have to start at the source of the waste, meaning the citizen himself, and actually have to segregate the waste, right? And how do you actually motivate people to do that? From our point of view, we actually think education is the first thing to do, right? And we are right now in a very digitalized world. Everybody has a smartphone, everybody is online all the time. So how do you educate people? Through digitalization. So in order to actually tackle the decentralization and the education part, we actually offer a complete open platform for any stakeholder to actually participate in solid waste management. We call it Swachhata. And basically, you can imagine that if you are a citizen, you can go on the platform, actually log in, and you can just find out anybody who is collecting waste, who is actually recycling waste, and you as a citizen, you actually earn some kind of rewards, right? So there you also have the motivation to actually educate yourself. So that is one part. I also see when you look at in India as a whole, you actually have a huge chance right now. If you look at Europe and also Germany, the solid waste systems have been in place since the 1930s. So the systems right now are like 60 or 70 years old, right? Also the technology is quite, well, if you have installed a system, you probably won't change it for the next 10 years. So I see for India specifically, you actually have a chance. You have the technology is there, the digitalization is there, you just have to take it, right? You can install the best systems so far, which, for example, in Germany, it's not yet possible. So I would say take on the chance to make India clean, and we as QSoft, we are definitely very welcome to any kind of discussions, any kind of concepts you may think might be applicable in India, and please come and talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Volkmar, for a nice presentation and just giving the timeline, which again is a very big challenge as such. Okay, so now may I invite Dr. Panagiotis Karamanos, who is Team Leader, EU Technical Cooperation for Environment in India project.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, panelists on the dais. This will be a short presentation in the next 5 minutes to introduce to you the European Union program called Technical Cooperation for Environment in India and related to the Indian scenario. I'll start with the question to you. Which city in the world operated the first anaerobic digester? And to make the question a little bit more exciting, I have here an iPhone for the person who will answer correctly. It's basically tea. Nice Indian tea, no iPhone. But would someone want to try? Please. Mumbai. Will you catch this? I'll give it to you afterwards. Excellent. So it was Mumbai, many years ago, credited having the first anaerobic digester in 1897. So India has been an innovator on environmental issues, both in terms of sewage treatment and solid waste management in the past, and still can be. And also the second point from this question is that incentives work. And this is an important issue on solid waste management. So the program that we are working on has an objective to contribute to India's sustainable and inclusive development by increasing the use of green energy sources, energy efficiency, and clean technologies based on the local experience of both India and the European Union. And this is a consortium based on a Swedish company, IVL, the Striram Institute here in Delhi for Industrial Research, and DTI in Denmark. And we are focusing on capacity building, on solid waste management and sewage treatment in Delhi and Mumbai. And it's a program that has been going on for the last 2.5 years, and we have another 1.5 years to work. And the beneficiaries are both at the ministry level, the municipal corporation level, but also non-governmental organizations and private entities. Now, we work in various areas. We arrange for study tours in Sweden, Denmark, and Germany. And here we focus, of course, on the technologies and the policies, but we look into the challenges and the solutions not by adopting the technologies and policies of the European Union, but looking into them and trying to see if and how they can be adjusted for the Indian scenario. We do consultation workshops. We are developing now in cooperation with the Ministry of Urban Development 2 e-learning modules. We have a number of publications and meetings with experts, but what I would like to focus in for a couple of minutes is the issue of the technical and policy reports and the community awareness program. Specifically, we do a lot of technical and policy analysis for our beneficiaries. And what this means is that we do not come up with some questions that need answers, but we take the questions from the beneficiaries and we try to analyze the problem, identify the challenges, and develop some potential solutions. So whether this has to do with the technologies in Europe, or whether this has to do with specific questions such as landfill taxation in Mumbai, or how waste transfer stations operate and could be implemented in India, these are some of the questions in the policy analysis and technical analysis that we do. But we also work at the ground level. We have a very good cooperation with Sri Mukti Sangatana, which is a non-governmental organization in Mumbai, for the development of a mobile awareness program. So what you see here on the two pictures are the posters that we have developed in cooperation with this NGO. And then you can see at the picture below how they have been exhibited in some community centers. Just to give you an example, this is a very simple, as you can see, poster which has two sides. So given that this takes place at various community centers which may not have the facilities, basically there's a long rope, as you can see on the picture over there. There are 10 of these, both sides. Very simple information about what can be done about waste management, and this is the way that we communicate that, or Sri Mukti Sangatana communicates that to the local communities, to students, to women, to waste pickers, and other stakeholders. So this project, the implementation started in 2017, February. So in conclusion, what are the key messages that I personally see from the implementation of the program? That initiatives are useful at all levels, local, regional, and national levels. Of course, different type of initiatives. For example, the national level has to set the framework, and maybe the regional state level focus on implementation. There's a combination of policies and technologies that are needed to address the challenges, and I think that has been obvious by the previous speakers and the speakers that are coming up. And also incentives are essential components of effective waste management. And when I talk about incentives, I don't refer only to financial incentives, but issues such as environmental awareness or the existence of facilities can also contribute to effective waste management. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Karamanos. And I'm very happy that you have dug out the history of anaerobic digester. It was actually at Lepar Ashram at Matunga, Mumbai. So I'm grateful for that you have dug out the history. Anyway, that was a nice presentation, and what he has mentioned, those are very simple solutions which we should try to emulate. Now, may I request Ms. Pinky Chandran, who is Director, Jain University and member of Solid Waste Management, RT India.
Systems. All right. So there's a very popular saying nothing is waste until it's wasted. And it's rightly so, given the smart city and the smart waste management context. So what is waste basically in this context? I think the waste is understood differently in different contexts, in different places. I think waste is material first. And when a material is discarded, we cannot act on it, until unless we treat it like a material. Because waste at the end of it is an actor. And having said this, I would like to take you back to the Bangalore model of looking at waste management. Because the time is short, I'm not going to be looking at a chronology of what happened since 2009, but simply said this is what Bangalore is doing, and I think it's the smartest approach to a smart city concept. The first thing that they did was to look at three-way segregation directed by the Honorable High Court of Karnataka. They also included something called the 2-bin 1-bag system, which is your wet and rejects the bin system and a bag for dry waste. Secondly, they looked at decentralization of waste by constructing the necessary infrastructure, which included dry waste collection centers, something very similar to your neighborhood recycling centers at the ward level, to look at basically aggregating all the low value waste, because the high value dry waste will anyway end up in the scrap shops. The second one was they looked at biomethanization plants of 5 tons per day at ward levels wherever space was available. Wherever space was not available, they've looked at zonal composting facilities. They've also looked at identifying a separate group, which is the multi-dwelling units and the commercial units, and categorize them as bulk waste generators. And for them, so while the dry waste collection and the biogas is from a municipal stream, they have also looked at empanelment of private vendors to service these bulk generators. Like what Dr. Singh had mentioned, in terms of collection and transportation, the costs are very high. In Bangalore, when we looked at an evaluation of the contract cost, we found that 50% was going in transportation, which was looking at taking all the mixed waste from Bangalore 40-50 kilometers away, and then whatever they would retrieve it is again coming back into the city, because the dry waste had the markets within the city. And so I think through the Lok Adalat and the High Court, both of them recognized the need to stop this and look at a decentralized waste management system. And that's how the bulk generator concept came in. And so the empanelment of private vendors to service these well generators also came in. So the onus right now is on the citizens. That apart, they've also looked at waste stream management, which is biomedical facilities, which is centralized, a leaf composting unit, and a central a construction and debris stream-based facility. They've also included the inclusion of waste pickers and scrap dealers in the entire system. I think Bangalore became the first municipality to actually issue ID cards to waste pickers, waste sorters, and itinerant buyers. And following this, they've also now looked at getting the informal sector to operate the dry waste collection center, which is a huge recognition of the informal sector in its light. The next level is obviously to look at regularizing, to actually legalizing and giving these kind of informal market space a recognition. Apart from that, what Bangalore has also looked at is to look at micro-planning. Very often we plan for a city's waste collection from a central level, from a top-down approach, but now they have broken it down and gone further deeper, and they have looked at it from a ward level. What is it for a 750 house block? What is the time required? How many autos do you require? What kind of street sweeping? Do we go with that? Should we look at formalizing or regularizing the municipal workers? How else then will we give access to the waste pickers? So there is no conflict in that particular thing. In addition, they've also empowered citizen volunteers to be able to monitor what's happening on the ground through the concept of Suchi Mitras. But that apart, there were also certain significant directions within the Bangalore model, which was, one was ban of single-use plastic bags. Then they've looked at festival waste management, which is huge. There's a huge effort for festivals like Ganesh, Diwali, and the likes. And of course, eco-waste events. So I think again, Bangalore takes the credit of actually looking at sustainable marathons. And events, large-scale events like this, waste is actually managed really well. In terms of awareness, because a lot of people were talking about awareness, what the municipality has also done has recognized and bought out a citizen participation program in the form of a master trainer program to actually recognize and to train people who want to involve themselves with the city's SWM. That apart, the city is also going gun-ho. If you're in Bangalore next Sunday, please visit. Every Sunday, there is something called a compost Sante, where the corporator and the MLA get involved to promote composting, both at the individual level and at the community level. And of course, the Karnataka Pollution Control Board has also now recognized something called Trashonomics, a booklet which was developed to look at teaching students waste management in schools. So all these things that Bangalore is doing, I think, is on the right path to looking at integrating it into the in the smart city concept. So I think, like again, quoting from Dr. Singh, I think we must move. A smart city would definitely mean moving from a linear approach to embracing a circular approach, but in the sense of looking at not just technology, but people, data, and a symbiosis of industry and also encouraging that through entrepreneurship at the lowest level, that is by recognizing the informal sector. You cannot not have them in a smart city concept and just look at burning or just look at aesthetics of the city. It has to be an integrated approach, and that's what Bangalore is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chandran. May I now request Mr. Harish Kumar, who is a consultant with Development Environergy Services Limited.
Good morning, everybody. I am Harish, representing DSL from Veolia Group. We provide engineering and project management consultancy for waste-to-energy projects. We have engineered India's 2 waste-to-energy projects, one in Okhla of 21 megawatt, another at Gazipur 12 megawatt. Now, today I am giving my presentation on this waste-to-energy. First, I have to give a brief scenario of India's waste. In developed countries, there is a waste generation of 0.6 kg per kilogram per day per capita, but in India, it is only 0.2 kg per capita per day. But due to the population of India of 1.3 billion, the waste generation is worse. Apart from this waste generation, the quality of waste, the nature of waste is very heterogeneous. It has a high variation of moisture, it has a high amount of inerts, it has debris in it, silt, which makes this MSW as a challenging fuel. Then what would be the solution for this solid waste? A long-term solution would be a circular economy, which co-speakers have already said, that behavioral change and sustainable solution, 100% recycle, 100% recover, zero landfill. It is a long-term solution. Then what would be the short-term solution? In present, India have a pyramid in which 90% of waste is dumped to the landfill, and only 10% of waste is reused, recycled, and go for a waste to energy. Let us think we invert this pyramid, and only 10% of waste has to go for the landfill, and 90% we try to reuse, recycle, and go for waste to energy. A task force which was conducted by Planning Commission in 2014, they say that cities which generate municipal waste more than 350 ton per day, they can go for a waste to energy with the proven technology. Here I have also done a pastel analysis for waste to energy for Indian scenario. First, a political aspect of that. As we know, that is a Swachh Bharat mission which was initiated by our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, in 2nd October 2014. And there is so many incentives from government also, which Kulwant Singh ji also had said. That SWM rule component 4, there is a SBM urban component 4, which says there is a systematic process for waste collection, treatment, disposal, take maximum recovery, and then go for the landfill. And there are incentives also, government has given incentives. There is one viability gap funding, which government has initiated, that 30% of fund is given by a central government, because these projects are very cost intensive. The cost of the projects varies from 13 CR to 18 CR. But without the help of government, we can't do for waste to energy project, though now they are giving an incentive. Second aspect, the environment one. Suppose the waste is dumped to the landfill. The methane gas is generated, which is have a 23 times global warming compared to CO2. And in India, per day, there is a waste generation of 1,85,500. If this waste has to be treated, then we can reduce the methane by 9.5 million ton per day. And GHG reduction can go up to 1500 metric ton. And land also can be saved for approximately 1800 hectare of land. Then there is a technological aspect of pastel. There are various technologies as per the waste characteristic. A waste come to the plant, recyclables can go for a resale, and a high moisture organic components can go for an anaerobic, then power generation, and reject from that go for a fertilizers. And the low organic and the combustible material of that municipal waste, which is waste is a wealth, I would say. They can go for a pyrolysis, gasification, and incineration. Though pyrolysis and gasification, it is not a well-proven technology for Indian scenario, but incineration technology, a waste to energy for incineration technology can be a option, a solution for this waste management. This incineration technology with RDF, there is a refuse-derived fuel. I'm not saying a high quality of RDF, but if we remove the inerts, if we remove the metals part from this and we shred it and go for an incineration technology, then we can give a green power, and ash generated from the boiler can be reused in a road pavement. We can be used for brick making and etc. A legislative aspect, which Kulwant Singh ji also said, that is SWM rule 2016. After 16 years, it was SWM rule in 2000. After 16 years, MOD has provided a guideline that there is a definite role of each stakeholders, whether it is a waste generator, whether it is MOD, whether it is MNRE, whether it is ULBs. They have defined a particular role of particular stakeholders. Then there is an economic aspect also. This waste to energy give a green power, give compost, give a less load on land. So that is a kind of pastel analysis which I have shared. Now there is a mindset that these waste to energy projects create toxic gases, creates dioxin and furans. Here I want to say there is a case study I want to share with you in Germany. In a decade of 1990 to 2000, there is a plastic increase of 13%. Plastic is a main source of dioxin and furans, but the emission was reduced by 1,000 times because they have selected a high quality of flue gas treatment system. In India, there is a SWM rule 2016. They have defined emission norms. Some of the clients which we are doing, we suggest them to go for a Euro norms. Euro norms are stringent compared to MOEF rules which they have given. I think with the positive vibe of Swachh Bharat mission and the support from central and state government, waste to energy can be a solution for big cities, I would say. The waste generated from more than 350 ton per day can be a solution. And I think we can meet a dream of our Prime Minister, which has to be, Swachh Bharat mission has to be complete by 2nd October 2019. And we can pay a tribute to our father of nation, Mahatma Gandhi ji. And I think this can be a solution. This is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Harish. Now, may I request Mr. R. Venkateswaran, who is Senior Vice President, Persistent System, to make his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk about what Persistent Systems does in this area of solid waste management. Persistent Systems as a company is a 26-year-old company, publicly listed. It's a software product company, been doing software products and product engineering services for the last 26 years. One of the things we realized about last year is when this whole smart city initiatives was getting started, was one of the verticals was in the area of solid waste management, and we believe that technology, especially with Internet of Things, that technology can be a great lever to bring in a lot of efficiency into this space. As Dr. Kulwant Singh said, the collection efficiency, the transportation costs are all fairly high. Collection efficiencies are low. And if technology can be used to address some of these issues, then we'll be able to bring in a more cost-effective and affordable solution to the whole smart city initiatives focused on the solid waste management. With that in mind, we looked at what we could do. And when we looked at the whole gamut of solid waste management, there are a lot of aspects. Being a technology company, we wanted to stay razor focused and come up with solutions that can address one or more parts of the whole end-to-end solution and partner with others rather than doing everything ourselves, partner with our friends in the space to see how we can offer an end-to-end solution. So we focused on the waste collection and transportation part of the whole ecosystem and partner with our partners for the disposal and processing of the waste. So we looked at what we could do there, and what are the various steps that happen when you look at solid waste collection and transportation. The first is the planning part. I mean, how do we really make it more efficient by planning the appropriate route for the waste to be picked up? This is an unorganized sector, so we need to bring in a lot of some kind of organization into it. We need to make sure we enable the sector to be technology savvy, and technology enablement has to be the first step. And municipal corporations today typically outsource these activities to contractors, and these contractors are incentivized by many factors, including the timeliness with which they pick up the waste, the amount of waste that they pick up, and so on and so forth. So to enable them to do a very thorough job of and an efficient job of picking up the waste, our solution focused on building in a lot of route optimization techniques, which focuses on not just going by a standard route, making sure that we understand the amount of waste that's there in the garbage bin. So we are now, the garbage bins are continuously sending data about the fill levels, the weight of garbage, all that stuff. We look at the parameters that come from these garbage bin. We look at parameters like the capacity of the trucks. We look at parameters like the traffics on the routes. We look at all these aspects and come up with an optimal route that a particular garbage pickup truck can follow. And this makes it very efficient for the trucks to follow. We make sure that these routes are updated dynamically based on the current situation at hand, rather than having a predefined schedule that is followed on a weekly, daily basis. We looked at, once we started doing this, we figured out that the routes have to be optimal, but the garbage trucks may not always follow the route. So once we looked at the planning aspect, the next part is to make sure that we monitor what the contractors do. So monitoring follows on two parts. One is when the garbage is being picked up, do the contractors follow the right kind of routes? How do we make sure that we put a geofence and alerts are raised in case they deviate from the predefined routes? We had systems in place to make that happen. The second part is in India, like I said, many of these contractors are incentivized by the amount or weight of garbage that they pick up, waste that they pick up. And many a times what they end up doing is, in addition to picking up the waste from the garbage bins, they also pick up other waste materials, and that to increase the weight. And that leads to inefficiencies, revenue leakage for the municipal bodies. So we came up with systems that can help to monitor and check these things. So once we do the planning, we do the monitoring, we do the checking, we make sure that everything is fully tracked. Municipal bodies have complete visibility and transparency of what's happening on the ground. And that's the key to make sure that everyone toes the line in terms of following a particular set of guidelines that they have to abide by for the waste pickup and transportation. Once we have all these in place, there's a lot of data that is getting generated. These data go into our IoT platform, and the platform does a lot of analytics on this data, and it can be used to make recommendations for town planning, city planning, placement of the garbage bins, and so far, and so on and so forth. Now, why is this something we are very excited about? Has this technology not been deployed elsewhere? Yes, definitely. Countries in North America, in Europe, they've all deployed many of these intelligent, smart solutions. One of the things that is a challenge in these smart solutions is the cost. these solutions are very, very expensive, and it's very difficult to just take them and plonk them, adapt them into Indian context and just expect that they will work. Indian scenarios are unique. We need to make sure that it works in the Indian scenarios. So we looked at how to make these solutions cost effective. We figured out that getting it done, manufactured in India with maybe some help from Taiwanese manufacturers would probably help. So we came up with a prototype device here, which can be retrofitted to existing garbage bins. Rather than designing a smart garbage bin from scratch, we felt that taking a small solution and retrofitting it into existing garbage bins would probably be the right way to go about this. So we have done that, and we believe that at scale these kind of devices will probably be very, very affordable. And that's what we want to do when we respond to these RFPs. We are trying to get the municipal bodies to realize that getting these done in India would probably be the best way to bring down the cost factor. One other challenge that we have seen is the technology in terms of connectivity. India, the cellular connectivity is fairly widespread, so we want to obviously leverage that. We also realized that in future we may have other technologies that will come in. So we have designed these devices to be fairly modular, where one communication technology that we do today, which will leverage the cellular infrastructure of 2G and 3G, can be eventually, we can just replace them or add a module or replace the module with a different communication technology like LoRa or something like that, which is more cost effective, which is more likely to be power efficient, can then be used to, we can just replace them. So we have designed it in a very modular way, and these are some of the innovations that we have done. And we believe we want to obviously work, we are a technology company, we want to work with the rest of the ecosystem to make sure that our solutions can be deployed in all the smart cities and make India solid waste, the solid waste part of India, the vision of cleanliness and Swachha Bharat Abhiyan, the mission that has been set up. We are part of that ecosystem, and our technology can be used to make that mission a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Venkateswaran, for suggesting and actually bringing in a smart bin solution to India. Now, we have the last speaker. Now, I think by design or by default, see, Dr. Kulwant Singh put a lot of stress on financing. And the last speaker we have is from IFC, Mr. James D. Michelson, who possibly would show us some ways to financing in a proper manner for the municipal waste management.
We'll be a little more technically focused, so, all right, but. Hi, everyone. As I was introduced, I'm James Michelson with the International Finance Corporation. We're part of the World Bank. We're their private sector arm. We provide financing solutions and advisory services to public sector, but also to municipalities and subnational entities. We do this in order to meet our vision statement, which is to end poverty and to promote shared prosperity. We focus on responsible companies in the waste sector. We focus on these companies that are making important investments with social and environmental and health considerations in a responsible way. Through our Sustainable Cities initiative, we have an active advisory team here in India that can work with municipalities to look at some of these solutions, look at some of these questions that they may be having, to put a private sector focused solution in place. And we think where we can add the most value is in medium to large size cities, probably cities that are producing 500 tons a day of waste or more, somewhere in that range or greater. So today, we can talk a lot, we get involved across solid waste management, across the entire value chain, but today I'm going to focus on waste to energy, and within waste to energy, we're really talking along the lines of what Mr. Kumar presented. So I'll be saying echoing a lot of the same things that Mr. Kumar said. So waste to energy solution and using proven technology as a treatment and disposal option, we think it may not be the best solution in all cases. An integrated landfill-based solution with recycling, composting, anaerobic digestion is many times the least cost solution and the best solution. But we think that waste to energy under certain situations and circumstances can be an important part of an integrated solution, particularly with this circular economy focused over the short term. It's really the only way that some kind of circular economy concept can be achieved. So where does it make sense? It's in highly urbanized, fast-growing large cities like Delhi, where land and transport is constrained, land is extremely expensive, and it really becomes a logistical issue. The next landfill that's going to need to be sited is going to be 200 kilometers plus from here, so it becomes a logistical question. Also, a key factor is you've got that we like to see is their current dump sites that are filling up and need to be closed and addressed, and waste to energy can help be part of that solution. So I really don't have time to get into a lot of details, but everyone knows that waste to energy has been tried multiple times in India and it has failed. And so why now? Why now do we think it can work? What's changed? Well, maybe I won't get into why it's failed, but a lot of the answers are embedded in what's different now. And one is there's just more experience in the market. Through these failures, a lot of the Indian companies, the consulting firms, as well as the international players have got a better understanding of India's unique situation. And that really goes to what we've heard by the panel, is that the waste characteristic is really, really different here. I mean, you've got a low calorific value waste, but you've got a lot of C&D and ash and inerts in it because there's so much construction and so much inert waste that's getting in the waste stream that it really creates challenges. Even if you compare it to China, it's a very, very different, which has some of the same conditions, but I would say the waste characteristic here is much, much more difficult. So you have better understanding, I would say better technology selections, better technology available. Not only, some of the technology providers not only have learned from the Chinese experience, but they've learned from the experience here over the last couple of years. So there's also this factor that municipalities are also getting smarter. I think they thought, and really waste is, I believe waste is a resource and you can extract a lot of resources from it, but it's not something that you should be paid for. I mean, if in a waste to energy solution based on the power prices that you're getting in the market and including the grant or the government subsidies, we think that a key revenue source is still going to be a tipping fee. So I think there's a greater realization that some level of tipping fee needs to be put in place. And we think that's a good thing. It sends the right messages to the municipality. It sends an incentive to get cost recovery in place, user fees that the end users are paying for disposal. And as Mr. Singh presented, we can increase that number, that 5% number for treatment and disposal to something greater than that is really the true cost of it. It's not free to treat and dispose waste, at least in the current context. And also, there's now a more fundamental and bankable power tariff that the private sector and the lenders can rely on. It will actually get paid, and I understand it's in the $100 a megawatt hour range. So, so that's a very promising thing. So, appropriate technology selection. As was mentioned, a lot of it surrounds around waste characteristic and waste quality. First of all, we think, or we're surmising, that some kind of, as Mr. Kumar said, some kind of RDF solution is necessary. You can't just do what they do in China, which they have a very difficult thing, which is put the waste, let it age in the waste bunker to reduce the moisture content for 5 to 7 days, and then put it in the waste to energy plant. That's not going to work here. You've got to do something additional to that to get some of the heavy C&D waste and inerts out. So some kind of light touch RDF, refuse-derived fuel, is going to be required. Also, I would encourage, there's a lot of experience gained by the European, Asian, and Japanese, as well as U.S. technology providers. They've learned from the China experience, and now you need to leverage that in the India space. China has a lot of experience in tough waste energy, but they're going to be challenged even further in adapting that technology to here in India. And I would caution you just to be very cautious about advanced thermal conversion technologies like pyrolysis, gasification, plasma gasification. These are there aren't a lot of success stories out there. There are a number of spectacular failures that have occurred in the last 5 years. Banks are very reluctant to finance them, particularly in an emerging market context. So there are some cases out there that are working, but they tend to be very expensive, CapEx and OpEx. So they work in a Japanese context, but maybe not so well in an Indian context. So I would just caution you, 10 years from now, we may be having a different discussion, but for now, I think this is, let's get it working in the UK and the US and other parts of Europe and Japan, and then let's get it working here. So, so I think from our perspective, finally, I would just say don't skimp on the technology. Make sure you're getting a robust technology with reference plants that you can go and touch and see on a similar scale that they're operating somewhere and with a similar feedstock, and make sure they're meeting the international standards on for environmental health and safety standards, particularly the emissions, as Mr. Kumar said. If we finance it, we're going to require you to either meet the EU or the US air emission standards. This is the only way we think it can be safely done, that we're comfortable with financing. So I think that's a good model to take. So finally, if you have any other questions, happy to talk to you. We're very, very interested in the waste sector, and would be happy to talk to you further. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Michelson, for keeping the timeline, first of all. And I'm very happy that you mentioned about the cautions that has to be taken for choosing upcoming technologies like pyrolysis, gasification, or plasma gasification. You see, actually, we were looking forward to the development in Tees Valley, where 1,000 tons in UK was to be plasma gasified, but it didn't work. So after about 6 months, it has been abandoned. Yeah. So that's a big lesson for all of us. So we have to be very sure about choosing the technology. Now, looking at the timeline, I think what time we have given, I think then what I can do is, I'll just take 2-3 minutes to say something and then finish it off. I'm very sorry that because of time we couldn't open for the questions or panel discussion. But now coming back to the waste management scenario here, you see we are talking about solutions, smart solutions for smart cities in future. Now the question that comes to my mind first of all is, what is smart about a city? And in the context of waste management, how do we define a smart waste management? I would think a smart entity is something which can cope with any change in situation, including any extreme, even the disaster conditions. So our systems have to be like that. First of all, the system has to be workable, has to work. And see, I often say, I have been into this sector for more than 35 years. So what I say today is, show me the waste, show me the site, and show me the money, and I'll design it. Whether it is from the centralized, decentralized perspectives, you see the site is very important. Whether it is about the sustainability, because if it is a high cost thing, you cannot spread it in a very short period if your project fails. So for the concession period of, let's say, 25 or 30 years, the project has to go. And while planning it and while preparing for the bid, whoever does this, whether the ULB or the private party, they have to see that the project has to be made for 25, 30 years. And even for decentralized systems, we have to see who manages it, how it has to be financially made viable. It's not something which has to be only fund-based or grant-based. It has to be something which is which has a much more solid foundation. I have been into the government sector also, I have worked with the private sector, and I have worked with the NGO sector also, fortunately. So today I would feel that for the solid waste management, the best thing would be to have a rock solid foundation where the polluter actually pays, and that is the final solution. But yes, to reach that stage, maybe we would need a lot of catalyst in the form of financing, in the form of grants and so on. Financing, of course, would be there. So the project has to be such that there is revenue accrual, and for the smaller projects, it's more important how the sustenance is done. Now, about the site, it's very important whether the site condition is suitable for future also. See, in the past, what we have seen is many projects were closed down because the cities grew closer and the people came towards the project, and ultimately there were court cases and they were closed. Very fortunately, we have been able to put in the rule now, and in our guideline also, the concept of buffer. So the buffer zone would be there, and I hope that would be very effective in countering this thing. But of course, implementation of the buffer zone is a very difficult issue at this point. But let's see. So coming back to the overall scenario, we have to first see that the site is suitable, that the planning is done in a way that the project runs for the whole concession period. The technology is chosen in a proper manner, and here there is one more thing. You see, the technology changes. If the concession period is for 30 years, you may have to counter complete changes in the technology, let's say at the interval of 10 years or 15 years. And one more thing, last point which I would like to mention. In every project, one has to make provision for repair and replacement. That will definitely come. Let's say 8th to 10th year first time, again 6-7 years after that, and finally maybe 5-6 years after that. If you don't make that provision, it would be a disaster. And one more issue, you see, we have the social issue of rag pickers. I'm very happy that something is being done by the Kabadiwalla association thing here. But what I feel is that the rag pickers, they need to be conglomerated or made into in a society like SHGs, self-help groups, and these groups can be made micro entrepreneurs so that they can grow, and many of them in future would definitely grow into bigger companies. Thank you very much.
Before we break for tea, I would like to request a chairperson, Dr. N.B. Mazumdar, to give out mementos to our esteemed speakers. Well, our lead speaker, Mr. Kulwant Singh, can we have a loud applause, please? Mr. Ganesh Kumar, Mr. Harshil Narula, Mr. Michael Lindenmayer, Ms. Milen, Mr. Karamanos, Ms. Pinky Chandran, Mr. R. Venkateswaran, and last but not the least, Mr. James. Which is the best? Mr. Harish Kumar. How come I missed out on it? Well, now I will request Mr. Shishir from Exhibitions India to give a memento to our chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Mazumdar, for chairing the session